There is a moment in almost every language learner's life when English stops feeling exciting. Not because you hate it, and certainly not because you've given up. Something stranger happens. You keep studying, listening, watching videos, movies. You learn new words. You attend classes, practice. You do almost everything you can and you were told to. And yet, your English feels exactly the same. You were improving 6 months ago, and yet, your English feels exactly the same. You were improving 6 months ago. You could feel it. A new word, a new sentence, a new conversation. Every single week. Something was changing. Then suddenly, nothing. You study another 100 words, and somehow, you still sound like yourself. You finish another course, and you're still making the same mistakes. You spend another month listening to English, and you still hesitate when you speak. And eventually you ask the question that hurts the most. Maybe this is just my level. Maybe this is as good as my English gets. But here's where today's investigation begins. What if you haven't reached your limit? What if you've reached the limit of the way you've been learning? That's today's investigation. Why does your English improve, then suddenly stop? Welcome back to the LinguaFox investigation series. In our first case, we questioned the idea that studying automatically leads to learning. In our second, we questioned the idea that living abroad automatically creates fluency. And in our third episode, we asked what happens when AI begins doing some of the mental work of learning for us. Today, we are investigating something much more personal. Something almost every serious language learner eventually encounters. The plateau, that frustrating period when your English is not bad, but it does not seem to be getting any better either. And this is where things become interesting, because perhaps the plateau is not what you think it is. Think back when you first started learning English. Everything was progress. You learned "how are you?" and suddenly you could have a conversation. You learned the past tense and suddenly you could talk about yesterday. You learned 50 new words, and the world seemed to contain 50 fewer mysteries. Beginner progress is loud. You can hear it, you can feel it, you can measure it, right? But then something changes. You reach a level where learning 10 new words does not transform your English. Learning another grammar rule does not suddenly make you fluent. Watching another English video, well, doesn't produce the same excitement anymore. The improvements become smaller, quieter, harder to notice. And many learners make their first mistake here, right here. They confuse less visible progress with no progress. But there's another possibility. Maybe your English has not stopped changing. Maybe the changes have simply become harder to see. Imagine two versions of yourself. You today and you 6 months ago. You might make almost the same number of grammar mistakes. Let's call them errors. You might know roughly the same number of words. You might even feel equally frustrated. So you conclude, I'm not improving. But then something happens. Someone asks you a question, and you answer without translating. You hear a speaker with an unfamiliar accent and understand most of it. You tell a story and recover from a mistake without stopping the conversation. You find a more precise word instead of settling for the first word that comes to your mind. You notice that something you used to struggle with now feels automatic. You didn't notice yourself improving because improvement does not always announce itself. Sometimes it quietly becomes normal. And yet, we shouldn't use this as an excuse, because sometimes a plateau really is a plateau. So, how do we tell the difference? Here's the uncomfortable possibility. Maybe your English has not stopped improving. Maybe you've stopped asking it to do anything new. You can handle your usual conversations. You know how to talk about your work, your family, your hobbies, your daily life. You watch the same kind of content, talk to the same people, use the same expressions, make the same kinds of errors. And because your English is good enough, you don't have to stretch it anymore. This is one of the strange things about becoming competent. The better your English becomes, the easier it becomes to stop challenging it. You can survive, you can communicate, you can get through the day, and survival is a powerful teacher. But survival does not necessarily demand growth. Think about what you call practice. You listen to English. Good. You speak English. Good. You learn vocabulary. Still good. But what kind? If you keep doing what you are already good at, you are mostly rehearsing what you already know. You might watch another video about a subject you already understand. Have another conversation about your daily routine. Review words you've already seen hundreds of times. Practice grammar you've already mastered. It feels like work. It feels productive, but sometimes you are not expanding your ability. You are maintaining it. And maintenance can look remarkably similar to progress. That's why so many learners can study English for years and still feel like they're standing in the same place. They are not necessarily lazy, they are not necessarily incapable, they may simply be practicing inside a very small circle. So perhaps we've been asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, how many hours did I study this week? Ask, what can I do in English today that I couldn't do comfortably 6 months ago? That's a different question. And it's much harder to answer because now you can't hide behind hours, you can't hide behind vocabulary lists, and you certainly cannot hide behind completed lessons. You have to look at performance. Can you explain a complicated idea without simplifying it beyond recognition? Can you disagree politely? Can you tell a story without preparing every sentence? Can you understand someone who doesn't speak the way your teacher does? Can you speak when the perfect word does not come to you? Can you recover instead of freezing? That's where progress becomes visible again. And this may be the most important part of today's investigation. The method that helped you reach intermediate English may not be the method that takes you to advanced English. Remember that. The exercises that worked at A2 may become insufficient at B2. Memorizing vocabulary can be incredibly useful, but eventually you need to retrieve that vocabulary under pressure. Studying grammar can give you structure, but eventually you need to make decisions in real time. Listening to English gives you exposure, no doubt about that, but eventually you need to interact with unpredictable people. And this is where many learners get stuck. They don't need more of the same. They need a different demand on the language. Maybe your next level is not hiding inside another textbook. Maybe it's hiding inside a task you currently avoid, the conversation you don't feel ready for, the presentation you keep rehearsing instead of delivering, the book that's slightly above your comfort level, the speaker you can't understand yet, the opinion you can't quite express, the situation where your English is not enough. Because that feeling, like, I don't know how to say this, can be frustrating, but it can also be information. It tells you where your current English ends. And once you know where it ends, you finally know where to push. So, does English really stop improving? Sometimes, but not always for the reason we think. Sometimes we stop seeing progress because progress becomes a little subtle. Sometimes we become comfortable enough to stop challenging ourselves. Sometimes our practice becomes repetition rather than development. And sometimes the method that got us here simply is not designed to take us further. So perhaps the plateau is not a wall. Perhaps it's a message. Your current way of learning has taken you as far as it can. And the answer is not necessarily study more, or harder, or memorize more, take another course. Sometimes the answer is to ask your English to do something it has never had to do before. If there is one idea I hope stays with you after today's investigation, it's this. Don't measure your English only by what you know. Measure it by what you can now do with what you know. Because fluency does not always announce itself. Sometimes it looks like a sentence that came faster, a conversation you didn't prepare for, a joke you finally understood, a mistake or error you recovered from without losing your confidence, a thought that used to exist only in your first language and suddenly came out in English. Those moments are easy to miss, but they are progress. And if they aren't happening, don't immediately blame yourself. Ask a better question. What am I repeatedly asking my English to do? Because your English competence can only grow beyond the demands you place on it. Maybe you haven't reached your limit. Maybe you've reached the limit of your current method. And that is not bad news. It means the next step is not necessarily more English. It may be a different way of using it. Next time, we'll investigate something even more uncomfortable. You can know the grammar, you can know the vocabulary, you can understand the sentence. You can even know exactly what you want to say. And still, when the moment comes, right, you freeze. Why? Is it confidence? Is it anxiety? Or is something else happening between, I don't know, knowing English and accessing it. That's our next investigation. Until then, don't just ask yourself, am I studying enough? Ask, is my English being asked to grow? This is the LinguaFox investigation series. Case file 4 closed.